Hello guys, Sujar speaking. Welcome to LJPCBM episode number 1100 and say 132. And today we're reacting to Rose podcast episode 95. The unfortunate Brad Kinston, voice of the unfortunate Charlie Brown. I'm not a huge fan of Charlie Brown anymore than I used to. But I'm a huge fan of Reagan Bass. Specials like Billy May Richards as Rudolph, Paul Souls as Herbie, and things like that. So, yeah, I'm not into Charlie Brown that much anymore, unfortunately. So, there you go on that. So, let's react to the 95th episode. If you're watching this, Dad, this is for you. So, let's react to this beginning in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Turn this up a little bit so I can you all hear this.
I'm Kerry Stinson, and my journey through life has been quite an adventure. For over 20 years, I've played Barney the Dinosaur on tour and 7 seasons of the hugely popular TV show, Barney and Friends. Now my journey is to bring together friends and guests from all over the entertainment world for inspiring and at times amusing behind-the-scenes conversation. I'm Kerry Stinson, and this is Purple Roads.
Okay.
Welcome to Purple Roads. My name is Kerry Stinson, and as always, I'm thrilled you're here. This is so much fun for me. This is someone we have on that I know his work. I love his work. You're gonna love his work. You're gonna know his work. This is so much fun, and we haven't done this before. You know, we go all over the children's universe with different shows, different performers, behind the scenes. This is one we haven't done yet, so I'm so excited. We have Brad Kinston, who was the voice of Charlie Brown. Really, that's all you have to say. Brad, how are you?
Hey, how are you, Kerry? Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, I'm thrilled to have you here. It's so funny. That's really all you have to say. You just mentioned Charlie Brown, and that kind of does
Keep it simple. I like to keep it simple.
That kind of does it. So, obviously, there's going to be so many places that we want to go this week on this. But you've done a lot of other things. Besides the voice of that, on-camera acting as well as voiceover.
Yes, I got into the industry when I was 8, doing commercials, doing sitcoms, and like Trapper John M.D. that was in the 80s, and Different Strokes and Silver Spoons, and I kind of ran the gambit of all, sitcoms, a couple of films, 75 commercials, a little bit of modeling, because that's, they always kind of throw kids into some modeling stuff, and then a ton of voice work, because my agent, one of the agents with my agency, Roger Halfond, he was in charge of the voiceover department. So he had me in the studio constantly doing commercials and a lot of dubbing, a lot of looping, which is where you do a lot of like Swedish films and Italian cartoons and movies, and you're dubbing over the Italian language into English, and I was constantly going on interviews. I think 5 days a week. The minute school was out, my mom was picking me up. We were running into Hollywood or Studio City or Century City, wherever the interview was, and at least 3 days a week, like 3 interviews a day, from 8 till until I could drive myself at 16. It was busy.
Yeah, I guess so. Did you have a desire to want to do this? I mean, how did this all work out?
I had a desire
pretty early for this.
Well, if you go back to when I was 8, we first moved out here from New York, New Jersey, and like everyone else that comes to LA and Hollywood, they want to go look at the stars and see the stars, and we didn't do it the traditional way. My mom wanted to. We walked onto the Universal Studios lot, not the tour, but the actual lot. And there's a commissary, which is, where all the stars go and eat lunch on the studio lot. And it's quasi open to the public. You can't go there, but we just walked onto the lot, and we would have lunch there maybe like once, twice a week. And some guy had asked, I mean, there's more to the story, but some guy had asked my mom, I remember, like, is your kid an actor? Like, what is he doing? And I think that kind of set like a light bulb above my mom's head, like maybe we should get him into the industry. And she sent letters to a few different agencies,
Mhm.
and
Hmm.
I wound up getting accepted by a whole bunch of agencies and chose one. I mean, that was really the start. We wound up, I mean, that day we were like walking around the Universal lot, going into the studios, going into the studio, and we walked onto the Buck Rogers set, and I met Gil Gerard and the whole cast there, and it was. I think that was the first time where I realized this is really, really cool. The kind of I didn't really get the whole acting with having to go to classes. I got more of like the glam aspect of it, that I can meet, you know, my favorite TV stars, and I can be on the set and hang out in the studio, and in a lot of ways it was like that. But there was a lot of work to it. A lot of I was in classes every day of the week. Well, 6 days a week, whether it was acting, comedy, drama, commercial classes, voiceover classes. Somebody had a really bad idea to put me in tap classes. I don't know where that came from. That was horrible.
Wow.
And I loved it. I fell in love with the whole thing. It was kind of a dream for a lot of years until you realized how much work it was. But it was better childhood than doing Little League. I mean, I was in Little League, you know, just to kind of have a normal childhood. But I had a better childhood than a lot of my friends had, just doing Little League and soccer. And, you know, it was kind of a surreal experience.
Were you able to find a balance between those two lives? I mean, you're hanging out with your friends, but you know, during the day or you know, in the afternoon,
Yeah.
you're doing these cool gigs.
You have a kind of a balance. I had a few good friends that I grew up in school, but I would say the majority of my friends were actors because I saw them more often. So there was kind of back in the late '70s and the '80s, it was a much smaller industry, especially in the children's department, where when you went to, let me use like ET as an example, you wind up going to the casting place, and if you look around, there's maybe 10 other kids that look almost just like you. And, you know, it might be like Corey Feldman and I mean, and Jason Hervey. And these are kids that had brown hair, you know, same colored eyes, basic, same height. And we were all from either the same agency or maybe 3 different agencies. And those were your playmates. Those were the kids that you hung out with and that you worked with and that you went to school with on the set. So in many ways, they you may not like hang out with them every day, but you saw them every day. So as you had your regular friends, then you had your actor friends, which it was kind of like a blurry. It was the lines were blurred in regards to who your real friends were. Not good friends, but like who your playmates were until you got older and you realized who your buddies were. But at that time, I mean, you're playing with your Matchbox cars on the floor of casting at Disney. As you know, you've already read over your lines and you know your lines, and now you kind of play for a few minutes and you're on the floor playing with Matchbox cars. And it's you look back on it, and the whole thing's kind of very surreal. But that was my daily life.
That was it. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. You know, I did the TV show Bernie and Friends for 12 years, and so I saw a little bit of that with the kids from our show, but it was a completely different experience because we're in Texas. It was just one show. It wasn't going from. I mean, all the things that you were doing was there. I was gonna say balance again, but I mean, from wanting to play to hold on a second, I have to go work. No.
No, I did not want to play sports. I did not. I had my life. I was, you know, from 8 to 21. It was. I had a specific constant, especially in my younger years, where my mom controlled my life. Not in a bad way, but she was my manager. She ran my life. She ran my schedule, and if I wasn't working, if I wasn't booking a job, I was interviewing for a job. That was my after school, and then we had dinner, we came home, and went to bed, went to normal school, and it was a rinse and repeat. It was my that was my goal, to not have to go to normal school. If I could book a job, I could go to school on the set. It was a big difference. 8 hours in little school, public school prison versus 3 hours on the set of one-on-one teaching. You got better grades because you had one-on-one instruction. You got to play with your heroes. in many ways. I mean, like I was under contract with Amblin. Well, it wasn't Amblin Entertainment yet, but it was Steven Spielberg's production company on the Universal lot, and I was doing a lot of voice work for them. So it was my days were spent in the studio, and you go to school and you would hang out on the lot and go visit people that you knew in different hangars. And it was TV land was your was your playland. Television was your playland. It was to be able to spend your days on the Paramount lot or the 20th Century lot. You kind of don't really think about how cool that is as a child, but once you get older, it's a pretty cool experience to be able to kind of have unfettered, access to wherever you wanted to go there, and you knew somebody at every studio. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I would do it again.
Wow.
I would definitely do it again if I had to. There's not a lot I would have changed. Yeah, not a lot.
Did you have was there something you enjoyed more? Was there, whether commercials or voiceovers or
Voiceovers
sitcoms?
voiceovers were easier. You
Okay.
worked less. You could roll into the booth, work for 3 or 4 hours, and practically in your pajamas, and you're out of there. That was the easiest work. Sitcoms were the most fun because you had a live audience. You worked just one week, unless it was reoccurring role. You worked just 1 week. You rehearsed all week, and you shot on Friday, and you had that live studio audience rush. I enjoyed doing sitcoms. Sitcoms were the most fun, especially because at the time there was no internet, so all of your friends got to watch you, and you got recognized, and that was a double-edged sword, being recognized. It was cool for some people, some people to say, hey, they were impressed, and it was fun for the ego. But then there was the dark side of it, where there were some people that were jealous or just angry, and you got a lot of crap about it, and you got teased in a lot of ways, and not really bullies, but just people that, if they could, they didn't want to see you happy or you get any kind of accolades. I think that's with anything, but that had happened more early in my career than later. Later, I couldn't have cared less, but early on, when you're an impressionable 8, 9, 10-year-old, it hits.
Well, sure.
Right.
I'm curious. You mentioned some of the other actors that you became friends with.
Sure.
Was there ever competition there?
There's
Trying to get
competition
the
with
job
everybody.
or losing the job or hard feelings?
No, there's no hard feelings. There's competition with everything. I mean, there's one thing I used to do, which I'd walk out of the casting office and say, like, thanks, Uncle Steve, that I got
Wait,
it.
really?
That my uncle's the casting person, and I'd see the look on everyone's face that, like, oh my God,
Hold on.
got it. That say, like, thanks, Uncle Steve,
Really? He had Uncle Steve. You stole it from me, Brad. Continue on.
like that I got it. That my uncle's the casting person, and I'd see the look on everyone's face that, like, oh my God, it's a family. He's got a family member in there. There's an old story. I mean, I've told it 1,000 times, but it's one of my favorite memories. Scotty Schwartz, the kid who was in The Toy and A Christmas Story. I met him when I was probably 8.5, maybe 9, and the two of us were. This is in New York. We were both the last 2 people to interview for the role of I think it was Flick, the kid who got his tongue stuck on the pole.
Yeah.
And we were both in this big building up, and the equivalent of like the network offices. And I went in first, read my role, and this is the final everything. We went through like 6 different stages. I flew to New York for this thing and to meet with them, and did my lines. I thought I did fantastic. I was in a really good mood, and we got downstairs and went out. And New York, there's always like the soft serve ice cream people, the trucks, and I'm getting some ice cream, and we're kind of quasi celebrating that I just booked this Richard Pryor big movie. I didn't book it yet, but I was pretty positive. And Scotty came out. It's about 25 minutes later, I'm on the street in front of the building just waiting to hear what's going on. And Scotty walking towards me. And right as we passed, he looked at me and said, "Got it," and just kept on walking by me. And it was one of those things where I was just like, oh, I knew he was telling the truth. Well, I didn't know 100%, but it was just in the sound in his voice. Two like 9-year-old kids, just as they walked by, and it was like a whisper. And yeah, and I said that to him when we ran into each other like maybe 15 years ago, when we became friends again. And like you gotta I don't think you remember the story. And I told him, he's like, yeah, that was pretty much, that was me. That kind of competition, but it wasn't like I hate this kid. Oh, there were kids where I hated, but not for that reason. But your kids.
How did you take that?
You saw them all the time, so it was just another job. I mean, they can book that job, and you see them 15, 20 minutes later on the next interview. I mean, we were racing around town trying to get to the next interview, get to the next callback or whatever you had. An hour and a half to get from Hollywood to, oh God, I don't even know what city 20th Century Fox is anymore. Let's just say Century City. It's 2 hours, but we have an hour and a half to get there. So my mom was racing through traffic, and it's not like now where you could just do a Zoom call and interview. You had to be first about a certain time.
Yes.
I was pulled out of school a lot, early, an hour early to make these interviews, and there were priorities. But you saw these kids every other day, so you didn't want to see certain people because you knew they would book the job because they might be better actors than you. I mean, like there's some kids. Jason Bateman, he was a better actor than me. I would say that in a heartbeat. He was a really good actor. I loved watching Jason Bateman work as a kid. There are certain kids that you want to be like. I wanted to be like Michael J. Fox. He was older than me, but these are the kind of like that comedic timing that you may be funny, but there's certain kids that just stood out. Certain people in the industry at that time that were just so funny. They were just like naturally funny. You tried to be like, and you didn't want to see them on an interview. If you did, you were like, Dan, you booked some things, but
they're not.
You definitely didn't want to see them there. It was easier to book the job if they were not there.
Oh, that's this whole thing is it's fascinating. No, I was just say it's absolutely fascinating. I was curious on the story beforehand. How did you take that when you lose out?
Move on.
That or you
don't care.
Really?
There's certain jobs where you really like you're that character. Like like that's you. You identify with them and you look kind of like them. Terms of Endearment, the kid who played is it Deborah Winger? I'm blanking. I think it was Deborah. Yeah, her oldest son. That kid is a dead ringer for me. I mean, like
Meatloaf reference. Continue on.
You see it. You're like, that looks. When I can say that looks exactly like me, that he and I were like dead on for that role. You want to get him because you're working with Jack Nicholson, you're working with Shirley MacLaine, and you're disappointed. You got through casting and you got through a couple rounds of callbacks. And you went to either network or the studio heads, and it's you and one or two other people. You walk out of there thinking like, I nailed that, I got that job, and then you find out from your agent, nope, they hired just whoever. It's disappointing, but there aren't many jobs that I as adults I look back and I'm like, damn, I really wish I would have gotten that. There was so many movies where my wife kind of just amazes that I interviewed for that one. I was, this one, me and this other person, she knows my entire casting history. I look back on it now and laugh. At the time, it was serious, but you just you move on. There aren't many movies or TV shows where I got so upset. It changed my life. I was so disappointed. Whatever. 300 interviews tomorrow, 2 on Thursday, 3 on Friday. You don't even know what that show. I mean, they're TV shows you want to book. But the movies, you don't even know what they are because they're all working titles. Like E.T. was called A Boy's Life, and it was based on like Boy Scouts, and didn't know, they didn't say what it was. So when you interview for A Boy's Life,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't really know, and I didn't know who Steven Spielberg really was, besides Jaws and a couple of his other big movies, but they weren't children's films.
No.
Close Encounters. It's just another director. He's not the Steven Spielberg that we know now. So you're not as excited. I mean, you are, but you know what I mean. He's not the legend. The 40 years, 50 years of films. So you're not as disappointed. You find a medium, and you're too busy anyway. So
Well, it just sounds like you were very mature for your age.
I was.
Did you? I mean, was that before, or did you grow up quickly? I guess is what I'm saying. When you got into this business, did you have to kind of grow up quickly, or were you already kind of mature when you got into it?
I was already kind of mature when I got into it. I dealt with adults really well. I knew how to talk to them, and I knew how to behave and sit still. And I wasn't one of those children that needed to be, whipped into submission because I had a hyperactivity disorder on set. And, I wanted to have a good reputation. I had a good reputation of hitting my marks and hitting my lines on the first take. So they would do a rehearsal take, and then we would just shoot, and then we were done. We move on, and they would, especially with commercials, I would have the same directors and casting people rebooking me over and over again for, I did six McDonald's commercials.
Wow.
Because they were easy to get. You met the same director, you met the same casting people. They knew what I could do, and they knew I wasn't going to be a pain in the ass. I knew I wasn't going to make them do 7 takes and then throw up a hamburger. And there was I'm actually just having a flashback of not Quaker Oats, it was the oatmeal bars, the chewy oatmeal bars. I remember having to eat 20 of those things. You take a bite and you chew it and smile and you spit into a bucket afterwards. And it wasn't my fault that the director had me doing like 20, 25 takes. And I remember just feeling green of just eating these things. But you can't throw up on set, and you can't say no, and you have to just be an adult, be a kid, but be an adult and just get through it with as little problems to the crew. And they'll love you, and they'll book you again and again and again, and work begets work, and you fill up your resume with cool things to do. And being on set, there's nothing better than being on set. Anybody that'll tell you, I mean, being on set's so much better than being at a normal job. I mean, it's such a better way of making a living. I mean, whatever you're doing on set, I would stand with a boom mic and stand in that position all day long rather than having to be in marketing or sales or, accounting or anything else. It's a way better way to make a living. And if you're an actor and you're a working actor, you get treated nice. As a kid, as an adult, sure, but even as a kid, you get your trailer. You get your lines. You get you have a social worker that's in charge of your safety. It was a fun way to be a kid. It was definitely a cool way to be a kid.
Well, it's fascinating. It's fascinating, but I got to know how we got into Charlie Brown, into the world of Charlie Brown, Snoopy, and all of that, because I'm just curious. Did you have any idea what you were walking into?
Absolutely not. I had zero, and I hear different stories. Another actor, child actor, Keith Coogan. We've had this conversation a couple times. He saw the interview process through different glasses than I did. I saw it just as another interview, another casting call to go on, an important casting call, but just another casting call. I went into a booth. I read for the line. I read for Charlie Brown. Didn't read for anybody else. I did my lines and I left. And I went to another interview. And, one of 3 or one of 4 of the day. Then I got a call back. I went in, did it again. I think it was 2 rounds of callbacks. And then I remember them calling me and say I got the job, and everyone was elated. Everyone was ecstatic in my family because that's a really big job.
Right.
Other kids that I know that interviewed have told me they had scoured the country looking for, they had interviewed for Charlie Brown and they didn't get the job. They got something else, or booked another character. But they were scouring the country. I didn't know they were scouring the country. I just thought it was just, my mom didn't say. It's a big. Sorry, I have it's flying around here. They just told me that it's just
exactly. Hang on.
Sorry, I have it's flying around here.
You one. Yeah. Post credit scene. Yeah.
They just told me that it's just another interview, so I wouldn't be nervous. And this is a story that not a lot of people know. When Lee Mendelson, he's sitting in he had a home studio, and he's listening to all the reels of all of the kids that were interviewing. I think it was Jason, his younger son Jason, is sitting on the floor and he's playing with his trucks and he's listening to different Charlie Browns. And I guess my reel came on the speakers, and he immediately looked up and said, "That's Charlie Brown." So in many ways, he's kind of responsible, because Jason knew he was around he sat in his dad's studio all the time listening to all the different voices and recording all the shows. So, and then they brought me back and told me that I got the job, and that was the best job I ever had, hands down. There's not another. I had more fun in shorter periods of time with other things, like specific, like film work or going to a studio and doing sitcoms. But the Peanuts thing was really, really cool. One was the longest job I ever had.
How many episodes did you do?
I think specials, we did 5 specials, 2 animated musicals, the You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and Flash Beagle, and then we did the Saturday morning cartoon series, the Charlie Brown and Snoopy Show, for 2 seasons. And that one was really special because that was the only project that Peanuts did where it was based on Charles Schultz's actual work. Like, all the other shows were written and directed by Lee Mendelson and Bill Melendez. The Halloween and the Christmas and all the other specials in between were written by other people, where the Saturday morning cartoon series were vignettes based on the Sunday cartoons. So he was in the studio a lot. I got to interact, not just meet him once or twice, but actually have conversations with him. And as a kid, I didn't understand really what that meant, because when you're 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, at 14 and on, I got it. But when you're younger, you don't really understand the true cultural importance of who Charles Schultz is. He's just an older guy. He's like a grandfather figure, and you don't really understand
he's a devil. Deal.
Cultural importance of who he is. You understand he's the boss, and you understand his name is on everything. But as a kid, there's a separation. As I got older, it all started to sink in that I had an experience with that not many in the what I call the fraternity, meaning all the other voices. I know a bunch of Lucys, a few Charlie Browns, and we were all, not all of us, but a lot of us are friends of sorts, especially since Facebook came around. We're all connected. I found a lot of them didn't have these experiences. They had their own, but not where Charles Schultz was in the studio with us on a daily basis. That was very bizarre. It was normal in a sense for a couple of years, but it wasn't normal for everyone else. So I look back on that with great fondness. There were, I remember he used to draw on a little sketch pad while he's just there, just squiggles and blah, 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 and he'd throw them away and throw them in the trash. And I would dumpster dive in the trash and I'd take the squiggles and I'd flatten them and I'd put them in a book. And, that's like in storage with a lot of my other end things. And it's because it was the longest job that I had. I have the most memories of it.
And how old were you when you started that job?
I booked my first one, I think it was 12.
Okay.
I think it was 1982. I got the job. And we started recording. I think the first one we recorded was in 1983, which was Is This Goodbye, Charlie Brown? So that was my first foray into it. And Lee Mendelson, the producer, used to be, especially in the beginning, with all the younger kids, and he was kind of like Charlie Brown boot camp, or with any of the characters. It was where he would say the line the way he wanted it to be said, and like a parrot, you would repeat the line exactly identical to the way he would say it. And by the second one, he wasn't doing it. I already knew what I was supposed to do, but that was very bizarre to be kind of like a parrot. It was saying like, "Good grief, Lucy," you would just say it exactly like you would want me to say it. And easiest job in the world. It was so much fun because you didn't realize how, you realized what it was, but
Right.
there's a cultural separation you don't get as a kid. So you treat it a little bit differently. And I look back on it now with extreme fondness that I don't have with a lot of the other jobs that I had because of who I was working with and who they are.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Do you remember the audition for Charlie Brown?
I remember everything like it was yesterday. It was just like anything else though. You're just in a booth.
Well,
You just show up.
Did they give you a reference? Did they have you just read lines? I mean,
No, you read lines. They gave you just like, paper. Here's your script. They give you like maybe 20. You don't need a whole bunch of time for this.
they don't give
20
you
minutes.
the voice, what they're looking for, how.
Nope, because you were submitted by your agent based on your voice.
Okay.
Like they knew Peppermint Patty had a scraggly voice, like a Sandy kind of voice. Charlie Brown had a kind of low and depressed sounding, and I always sounded low and depressed all the time anyway. I didn't have like a soprano, high pitched voice. I had, different than it is now, obviously, but it was the same monotone. What they would just do is just give us the script, give us some pages, and you go in and you do your thing. And I knew that the Charlie Brown kind of the way that they wanted everything to sound like this, and there was a pace and a timing. And I'd already done a lot of voice work, so it wasn't my first time in a booth. I kind of knew what was expected, to go in there, just bang it out, and cross your fingers and hope you get it. Just do the best you can. You win in the 1 and 2 takes that you get, and hope to God, you book the job. And that was one of those really, you book some, you win some, you lose some. You lose more than you book. You definitely, if you can book 3 out of 10 jobs, you're in really good shape. That's a good percentage. If you're booking 30%, booking more is better. But if I'm booking as a kid, if you're booking 30% of your jobs, you're going on interviews and you're interviewing with legends, and the people that are going to interview in that booth afterwards, they've got resumes in their own right. So
it's fascinating because I'm listening to this, and you're almost describing this like you're doing this as an adult. I think that's the part that's so fascinating.
You are an adult. You're just a smaller adult.
Right, but I mean, and I've seen it. Some of the kids, for different reasons, right, couldn't handle it, or this that I worked with, and some were amazing. We had some that were like that you knew immediately. Oh my gosh, what a pro at a young age. But it's amazing listening to this, because you're dealing with losing things and seeing celebrity doing all these things at such a young age and handling it well. It's pretty amazing.
And it's the reason why you see when child actors get older, they don't work a lot. There's a place in there between maybe 15 and 21 where there's a challenge, where you don't get a lot of work, and that's why there's not a lot of, use his name again, Jason Bateman's out there, that transition from child actor to successful working actor as an adult. They may be super famous when they were a kid, but once they hit adult age, nobody either wants to work with them. There's good actor for kids, and then there's good actor for adults. There's a difference. Not all great kid actors are great adult actors. If they can get through that period without becoming completely disillusioned or a drug addict, or that's why you see a lot of child actors, they wind up going the wrong way. It's because of that disappointment as a child. I didn't take it very seriously, but by the time I was 19, I was not, I was very disillusioned with the industry. Like 80% of everybody that I know, all of my friends that I grew up with, most of them are not in the industry, or they've gotten back in the industry in the last 10, 15 years. But they all quit. They all quit once they became adults because it takes its toll. It's hard to hear no, and it's hard to work for short bursts of time, and you don't get a lot of you don't get what you need as a kid to become a productive adult. Not all the time, but many times you just don't get what you need to grow up and become a productive member of society and get a normal job that's not glamorous and not get that attention. And know, when you get a job in the real world, you don't get your own trailer. You don't get craft. There's not craft service. There's not craft services table. You don't make $800 a day for maybe a half hour's worth of work, but you sat on your butt in the trailer reading a book or reading your lines the entire day or the entire week. You didn't make $5,000 for a week. It's a difficult, weird transition as a kid. Some people survive it, some don't. Most do.
And what was it for you? Did it end? How did it, when you got to that age?
It ended on my own terms. I didn't go the drugs and crime route, the tattoos on the face and the choke collar and things you see in the tabloids. I wound up joining the army. That was my middle finger to my parents. That was the first week of Desert Shield, November of 1990. I'm like, I'll show you, and I literally enlisted, and I went off for a couple of years into the military and kind of went that route. I didn't really see myself becoming a felonious drug addict, and sleeping behind dumpsters and doing the Danny Bonaducci route of just angry with the world and ruining my life that way. But I did my own thing. Some people quit and go to college. So, everyone has their own thing. Mine was just I didn't care. And, I've done it. I've been the kind of, I hate to call it the dancing monkey. Yeah. If you're told what to do and you do it and you get paid well and you have great experiences, make friends, and it's a great thing. But after so many, a decade or two of doing it, you're a little disillusioned with, I want to experience the real world, and no one told me that the real world is horrible. Don't go into the light, don't go into the real world. I wanted to experience real life, and it was okay. You do your thing. I got married and had children, and I lived a normal life. And a lot of people go back into the industry and they get agents and they want to go do try the adult route. I tried it for a few years back. It was maybe 15 years ago. I didn't really enjoy it as much. So I was like, I'll continue on what I'm doing and go that route.
Is that because, as you become adult, you see behind the curtain, right? You when you're a kid, you don't see everything that's going on as you do when you're an adult.
I think there's that. I've seen it, but I saw it from a different generation. This generation is internet focused, reality show focused. You're not going on interviews. You're doing, this is our interview, and people are willing to go a little farther, and it's diluted. In my eyes, a lot of it's diluted. I also never knew how hard it was to run my career. My mom ran it up until I was 18 years old. She was a personal manager, and then she was going to be an agent, but she was a manager of other people, but mostly me. She ran my career. I found it really hard, and I had a lot going on, and
Hello?
I didn't want it badly enough to become a weight in my 30s, and early 40s. I still had children that were older, but they weren't out in college yet. I didn't want to. I didn't want to starve. That's really. I mean, if you're going to be an actor, you have to go all out. You know, it's expensive. You have to pay for classes. You have to drive yourself everywhere. You have to starve for a while and survive on maybe $8,000 a year, 9,000 a year, 10,000 a year. I couldn't do that after making normal money.
Right.
Not entertainment money, but you know, like a regular job.
Right.
And after making regular money and having a house and paying for health care and food, to kind of go backwards and be selfish and have it for myself. I kind of looked at it a little bit as selfishness, where it's like, okay, my wife's not gonna have what she needs, and my kids for what? For my dream.
Right.
I should have just stayed. I mean, but looking back on it, I can say that I should have stayed, but it wasn't. I needed to do what I did, and it was. Would I do it again? Probably. I would probably. It wasn't as much of a mistake as it was a calculated error in my own life. So, but I did it, and I wound up getting married and having children, and your life isn't your life anymore. It's everyone's life. So, yeah, you just
You know, it's interesting though, because I can understand it, and I mean that's a lot. When you can, I mean, you're naming off all the things you did. I mean, you're working and auditioning, and the pressure builds up. I can see needing some aspect of a release.
You know, like my dad managed did baseball teams and things like that. He had me in the little league and to try and give me a little bit of a normal life. But I mean, I can remember more than 20, 30 times not going to practice because I had interviews, not being at the game because I had interviews. There was always something that came first. And I loved it. I wouldn't have traded it. I did not want to be playing Little League Baseball. It was, it was my dad's thing of that I needed a normal American experience. Like, let's give him some normalcy. I didn't want normalcy. I wanted to make money. I wanted to have things. Every time I worked, I was rewarded with a toy. I'd go to the toy store, and depending on the amount of work and the amount of the paycheck, would be the amount of a toy or something. I remember I bought after my third McDonald's, no, it was the new Coke in 1985. I bought the new Coke. It's almost ashamed of new Coke. So I booked this national new Coke commercial, and it was one day, a quick, cut 2-3 seconds with me and this girl in a photo booth. Easiest job ever, 10 grand for the day, and I bought a waterbed. I was 14. That's what we got in 1985. We got waterbeds.
That's awesome.
So it's like things like that. I enjoyed that. Nobody had a waterbed.
Right.
14-year-old kid had a king-size waterbed with beers, and that's ridiculous. But this was I wasn't spoiled. I spoiled myself, but I wasn't spoiled. But I still wanted to book another job. That was my incentive. What's your incentive to work? Not just working, but you're a kid, like a dog. You need a treat.
Right.
That was my treat. I booked a commercial. I got to go to the toy store and buy a new Atari game. It was, that was my reward. Loved it. I wouldn't have traded it for the world until the end, where you're kind of looking back on, like, am I missing something?
Right.
What am I missing? And I'm doing the same thing now that I was doing when I was a kid. I didn't know that that's what an actor does. For the rest of my life, that's what I'm going to do. I needed to see, what else was out there.
Sure.
Yeah, it's all right. Wish somebody would have told me what was out there. It's horrible. It's terrible out there. I hate it. I don't want to go. But it's, that was my adult life. I lived a normal, depressing adult life like everybody else. Everybody has their ups and downs, but it definitely different from the glam. I guess that's the best way to put it. The glamour of my childhood and my teen years. Completely different world.
Well, I totally understand it. I did Barney for 22 years.
Yeah.
I was getting to do things no one else gets to do.
Yeah.
Performed at Radio City Music Hall 3 or 4 times. I mean, I can go on and on.
You lived it. You lived it.
Wow. You're meeting people, you're doing all these things, and then you go back, and no one else is getting to do that. No one
No.
else has done that. No one. I've traveled every place in the U.S.
Everywhere.
many times over. You can't.
It,
You
it
can't
makes
relate to it. It gets to the point where you don't even tell the stories anymore. You just kind of hold some of that stuff in.
it makes for great stories.
Right.
You know, I mean, I still have a good, not large group, but a medium-sized group of the kids that I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
We all have it's you know I'll use the word again, fraternity. It's our nobody knows but them what we did and what not what we went through per se, but yeah, I guess what we went through. In growing up in the '80s, it was a different world, and so different than today. The internet really opened things up to seeing behind the curtain on how things work, and back then there was no curtain. You just the curtain was closed for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Even like the Universal lot, it looks like a maximum security prison to get on that lot now. You're never getting on that lot. There's like steel bars and armed guards, and back then there was no fence, and it was the Barney Fife was monitoring the guard post, and he just waved, hi, and he just walked on in. It was like the arm that lets cars in. There was nothing. Now you couldn't get on that lot, not a chance, and walk through the studios, just have free open the door, walk on in. Nobody stopped us. Now you couldn't do that. It's just nobody understands. So it's nice to have those friends, and we do like Comic-Con stuff and pop culture conventions, and it's like hanging out with your best friends for the weekend. We meet fans and talk to different like animators and fans, and see people that we haven't seen in 25, 30, 40 years, and tell stories, and that's the benefit for a lot of us that we do a lot of these shows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're getting back out doing them again, right?
I've been doing the shows,
but I mean, since
first
the
one it was
pandemic and everything.
Yeah, it was like 2007. I started doing the conventions, and
Wow.
I traveled a little bit until 2010, and stopped traveling to different states. And this is actually the first year where I'm actually leaving the state, leaving California, and going a couple different states, and doing a few different shows. I'm excited.
Okay.
It's exciting. There's a lot of fans where they have questions, and I enjoy answering them. And some people are really hardcore, diehard fans of Peanuts. Those are my favorite people. They know more than I do.
Well, and it's got to be fascinating on something like that. It's been around forever, and the different aspects of it, right? All the years of it, and the different, as you mentioned, there's been some other people who've done voices, and the animation's been. But who doesn't know who Peanuts is?
Everybody. If you don't know who Charlie Brown is, you've been living. You've been either living under a rock or some really dark place in Eastern Europe.
Actually, you will be living a log in a dark place, because number one, I don't even know who Charlie Brown is anymore. And two, I feel horrified because I feel like I'm a devil, or actually angel, something like that. I don't know. Depending on how long I feel I'm a Breaking Bad fan rather than the Charlie Brown fan, because it's more specific than just being a Breaking Bad for a Breaking Bad fan. So because number one, Breaking Bad is my thing, and two, Charlie Brown is not my thing, because you all have time for this, for respect your opinions. Continue on.
I mean, especially in Asia and Europe and America, it's part of Americana. But even like Japan, it's on their baseball. Snoopy's on their baseball uniforms, and it's part of their educational curriculum in parts of China and Singapore and Japan, and it's played in France and Europe. It's amazing that many people are familiar with something that I did in 40 years ago.
When did you realize that? Did you realize that at all back when you were doing it?
Not at all. No, I knew it was popular. I knew what Peanuts was, but you also have to remember when I did it, we were barely celebrating 20 years of television.
Wow.
So it wasn't. I mean, now we're 20, 40, but 60 years
Hmm.
on television. You know, with not in the comics. Comics have been around since the late 50s, but in television itself, I think we were rolling into 20 years. I think we were 18 years when I came on.
Wow.
So as popular as it was, everybody knew it was also the early 80s. So you don't have, especially a kid doesn't have that worldly experience. I didn't know what was going on in Europe or Asia because I didn't read any of their newspapers or watch their news programs on the non-cable television that we didn't have yet. So it was a different experience to realize later on. I didn't tell anybody in the 90s that I did Charlie Brown. When I left the industry and I was in the army and started working in marketing, nobody knew. I never told a soul. Girls that I dated, never would I tell anybody because the first thing they would say, like everyone says, is say something like Charlie Brown. The first thing they would say, and I'm like, okay, I didn't know. Yeah, you don't really sound like him. It's because I'm not 12, 13, 14, 15 years old anymore. You couldn't prove it.
Right.
So you wouldn't say anything. So it was something that, it's not that I wasn't proud, it's just you couldn't prove it.
Right.
It wasn't such of, even if you could talk like, you know, Homer Simpson, doesn't mean you're Homer, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean you're Homer Simpson.
Right.
Yes. That's a
there was
good
no
show.
internet to check. So you kept it to yourself. It wasn't until maybe the internet became a little bit more open and you could prove it that it would come up more in conversation. And if somebody was talking about how much they loved Charlie Brown and things like that, you could say, hey, Google my name and just laugh. I did that with my wife when we first met. She was telling me how much she loved Snoopy. It just came up in like naturally in conversation. She talked about how much she loved Snoopy and Charlie Brown, and I just started laughing. This is our first date, and I just started laughing. I'm like, I scored. I said, and I told her, I said, just Google my name, and I just looked to see the look on her face, and we just laughed, and you know, it's more fun now than it was for a good number of years. When I was a kid, it was work. Now it's just fun. I enjoy talking to people about it, and everybody has a different memory and different story. And you know, their dog was named Snoopy. It was such, you know, a lot of people have tattoos, and those are, you know, my favorite to see those things. And you know, it's a kick at this age to still be old enough to enjoy it. I mean, I'm not super old yet, so I still have a lot of fun to enjoy it.
Well, it's fascinating you saying this because I went through the same thing. I didn't tell people what I had done, you know, my face, I was in the costume, so my face was hidden for years. But then when the internet came, I had to, like when go on dates and stuff, I'd have to mention it because I knew they were going to look me up.
That's exactly it.
I knew they were going to look me up. And so my wife, we just got married, but we've been together for 3 years. And when we were talking, I told her, you know, because I knew I was going to get looked up. And so she went to her daughter and said, this guy I'm talking to says he was Barney. And within 30 seconds, she had looked me up on Twitter and you know, it's crazy how the internet really changed that.
Well, it provided proof.
Right.
That's just really what it was. It just provided rock solid. But one person said to me, I can't remember, someone on Facebook said like prove it. Like who said? Like it came up with somebody else that said he's Charlie Brown. I'm like, who said he's Charlie Brown? And everyone's like, Google. That's who said. I'm not saying a word. I don't need to prove myself to anybody. It's like if you doubt me, just look up, just type in Charlie Brown and Brad. My face will come up, my resume, my history. There's other videos, and you know, there's interviews throughout the years and news articles. I don't need to prove myself to anybody at this point. You don't believe me? I don't care.
Right.
It's all right. It's not my job to.
Yeah, no, because I used to get the same thing of, yeah, sure you are. I'm like, if I was going to make something up, that's probably not where I would have gone.
Yeah, it's not where you're gonna start.
Right.
Yeah, no, believe me, it's like I get it. I get
Oh
it.
my God. So I want to talk a little. We got a little bit more time here. I want to talk about
Sure.
Peanuts a little bit more. So when you were recording those specials, did you meet the other actors, or were you just going in doing your part and coming out?
We all went. Well, there were two different. I went through a few different casts. I had two different casts with the series, the Saturday morning series that I went through. And then there was a cast for Your Good Man, Charlie Brown, and then we had another cast where they recast. Thankfully, I stayed Charlie Brown through these things. And we had another cast for Flash Beagle. For the shows and for the series, we would all wind up going to the recording studio, and we'd spend the whole day at the studio. We'd do school on the set, and each of us would be called then to the booth to record on our own.
Okay.
And record, and then we'd go back to school. Then we'd come back in, and we'd do a little bit more and go back into school. And that would take up the whole day. So I knew everyone. I saw everyone. A lot of these people I already knew beforehand through going on interviews. You'd see them I worked with a couple other people before. My mom and their parents, my parents and their parents are now friends, and we're kind of a tight group. With the musicals, we would do it that way, but there was also ensemble stuff where like the chorus, so we were all in the studio together, and we would work. There would be like 6 of us. We all had our own mic, and we would play it that way. Other than that, you're together as a group, but you're in the studio by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just because they recorded everything separate. Everybody had their own track, and then they would mix everything together later on. So you saw everyone, but you didn't work with everyone all the time. It wasn't necessary.
And was everyone young?
Everybody was young. That was the one thing about Peanuts is you're all kids. You're always kids. If you can drive yourself there, you're done. You'll be replaced at that point. Mine was. It was my time was almost up during the musicals when my singing was more like the Peter Brady syndrome with your voice was cracking, your voice wasn't quite where it should be, and your voice was starting to change. So through the musicals, after I think Flash Beagle was my final thing. I think it was going in like 85, 86, and that was it for me. And then they called me and told me that was depressing. That was you don't cry. You're not crying in your room, or or rocking yourself in a bathtub, with a bottle of scotch. But
right.
you're not quite there. But it's one of those moments that it's been such a huge part of your life for so many years that it's not there anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And again, every one of the former voice actors that I know, we all went through it. We all went through. There's a little bit of a disappointment because you're nicely let go.
Right.
Thank you very much for your, like in the Marines, thank you for your service, and here's a flag. It's similar to that in a way, but you're replaced. So I've never, like you wind up hating the person inside your brain, the person that replaced you. You know who he is, you know his name, and it's like, damn him, but that's how it is. You go to these reunions.
And you didn't do anything wrong. You just grew up.
No, you grow out of it. You're gone no matter what. It's happened. Right. I'm fortunate that there are Charlie Browns that only did one. They did one special, and that was it. I did a lot of stuff. I did more stuff than I think anybody did. I had specials, musicals, commercials. I had my own series for 2 seasons. Like we had a lot of stuff going on, a lot of work that we did. The 20th anniversary, the 40th anniversary special. There were specials in between that I lent my voice to. So there was always something that they're bringing us back to. We had reunion specials, reunions at like Knott's Berry Farm, the amusement park that has Camp Snoopy. We broke ground for Camp Snoopy. They had a thing for McDonald's where they would get glasses, the Camp Snoopy never took. It was. But my point is, there was always something we were promoting and something that we were recording. So I'm extremely fortunate that it lasted as long. That it wasn't just one special and that's it. It could have been just, you've got a shiny computer, Charlie Brown, and whatever, some random special, and then, that's my claim to fame is the computer episode, making it up. They kept asking me back, and they kept asking me back, and when they would recast an entire cast, I was the same Charlie Brown in multiple casts. So I'm fortunate that they kept me for as many years. It's great. I mean, that's a compliment in itself. They didn't get rid of me until they had to. And they had.
It has been just a pleasure talking to you. It's just fascinating. I can't thank you enough for being on.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Carrie.
So where can people come see you? Do you have sites that you promote all of where you're going to be?
Right now, let's see. I'm going to be, and I've got a list to my left here because I remember. I just want to get it right. There's the Florida Toy Show and Expo in Kissimmee, Florida. I'm there on March 6th. I'm going to West Texas. I think it's West Texas Comic Con, July 16 and 17.
Which is last year, by the way. Continue on.
National Sports Convention in Atlantic City. I'm really looking forward to that one because I'm from New Jersey and I've never been to Atlantic City. So I'm there for 3 days from the 28th to the 31st. I'm sure there'll be a few things filling in the gaps in between March and July, but those are the three. Definitely looking forward to it because I think I've only done one out-of-state convention. I think I did it in the end of 2019 for a day and a half in Miami for a small show. But other than that, I haven't gone anywhere. I'm looking forward to. I get emails all the time. When you come in here? When you come in there? And I'm like, I have no idea. I'd love to come there. Somebody book me to that show. And sometimes the promoters don't want voice people. There's always a reason for why they're not bringing in voice people. But I think now cartoons it's a different industry now. The voice work and with a lot of the Japanese stuff, voice work is just as popular as anything else. So we're getting a lot more reception too. If I want to travel to Motor City and in Detroit, and getting out there. And so right now those are the three places, and I'm looking forward to going out there and seeing everyone and see everyone soon.
Well, that's just awesome. And if you're watching this, go see him. If you're there, go see him. I have a feeling we'll run into each other at some point, and so I can't wait to actually meet you in person.
Dude, thanks,
But it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much, Brad.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Well, and thank you for watching Purple Roads. Remember to keep your eyes, ears, and your heart open, and you'll find your Purple Road. We'll see you next week.
So that was Purple Roads, episode 95, Brad Kesson, the voice of Charlie Brown. I am not a fan of Charlie Brown per se. He likes fly spoon shoot around the way, things like that, blah, blah, blah. And, things like that feels like terrible per se, but it was a catchy episode per se of Purple Roads podcast. I'm sorry, but the Charlie Brown episode just feels like you're in the mixed per se. I'm not a fan of Charlie Brown, and I might always be. When he says about you're alone in a dark place, I'm like, shut up. Seriously, I'm doing fine. Looking at Rick and Bass, looking at LJPCBM Club. That's my child. And looking at Toon Disney, that was my childhood growing up. Especially I'm a technician and filmmaker over the years. I'm in a sense of childhood. That was good. It was good enough for me. That was LJPCBM episode number 1100 and 172. Hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned for the next one's gonna be LJPCBM episode number 1173, which will be about Purple Rose episode 96. Who's Cammy and Bonnie and Friends. And hoping it'll be much better than it was on 95th episode of Purple Rose Podcast. Till next time, Sue Johnson, episode baby. Good words, reacting, Sue. Just out. See ya.
Given unto me this life I'll never take for granted, and given all the time I failed to really understand it, I never sought to meet the maker of reality, the one who gave the life that which is always happening, but I tried all the time. Why was I the one to see things as I do under the moonlight and the sun? Perception is the question, and the giver holds the key.